We are recording. So, hi everyone, I'm Jewel Alderson Clark. I am the Integrated Curriculum Coordinator for the San Diego County Office of Education. And what we are going to talk about today is leveraging the College and Career Indicator, the equity data that you'll find deep. It's not just on the dashboard, but you'll find deep within the dashboard on the CDE website. Tons of amazing data. And spoiler alert, some of the data from last year, even though we didn't get dashboard results, some of that data is actually available, so you'll kind of be able to see how you did in that year where we didn't necessarily have dashboard colors as well. So as we go forward, again, the link is in the chat to the slides. This is not a sit and get. I really encourage you, and a couple of slides in, I'm going to give you a worksheet. Yep, you get a worksheet. And your goal is to use that with your data to identify some of the special populations you might want to kind of have extra thought around as we serve all of our students. And so jump into the slides. There's tons of links. Again, I will be I am recording this, so I will send this recording out to everyone who registered in the next 24 hours or so. So let's go ahead and get started. So I wanted to start out with a few slides that just dive into SWP round 4. If you are probably aware by now that was released on Monday of last week. Time gets away from all of us these days. But I really wanted to reiterate some of the biggest changes in this round of SWP are around the use of equity data and this concept. California is committed to investing in developing a skilled workforce to meet the state's labor market needs and to ensure upward social and economic mobility for Californians. And what that means is that we really want our students to have opportunities that are maybe have a higher economic gain than their current opportunities are for them. So we want to make sure that students can compete in our innovation economy, that we do have opportunities for them to do more than they see in their neighborhood around them. And so I know in San Diego County, we have a large innovation economy, and when we look at the data, our students are not equitably able to get into those because they don't have the skills, they don't have the background, they might not have the education to be eligible. And so that's what we're doing. And so thank you everyone for joining us here and having this passion for our students' upward economic mobility through CTE classes. You can read through all of this at your leisure, but if you go through the RFA, there's a lot on equity. And so one of these newer pieces is this primary objective around closing the equity gaps, improving access and completion of CTE opportunities for disproportionately impacted students. Now, this is all in the language of the RFA, but I know that at the end of the day, the scoring is probably what really is the bottom line. And when you look at this, what you want to do is you want to compare the RFA to the rubric. So if you haven't dug in or you haven't done the SWP applications before, you have the RFA, which kind of outlines what they want from you, but then there's a scoring rubric that your local, there's a big group of local folks who will go through and score all of the applications. And so there are a number of scoring elements that are aligned with equity. And so before we jump into all of your data, it's helpful for you to just be familiar and understand kind of a balance of like the urgency and importance of this data and how it can impact your applications. And today we're focused more on SWP round 4, but this also applies to things like CTE incentive grant, a Perkins. When you are applying for all of these grants, there are so many ways to utilize your data in setting those goals. All right, so this specifically talks about we want to have clear documented database evidence. And so a lot of this evidence can actually come straight from the dashboard. Our project objectives, we definitely want to clearly describe what efforts we're taking to close equity gaps. So as we go through these today, I'll kind of share some of the efforts that you might consider to help you with your equity gaps. When we get into positive considerations, we also see dropout rate, unduplicated pupils in special populations, specifically categorized there. And the way that they're scoring these are kind of like 2 points each. And so it's kind of a yes or no question. So hopefully no one is losing points on these. Hopefully you're all really focused on ensuring that these students are served along the way. And finally, you'll have a work plan. The work plan is kind of scored differently. You'll see it's like a larger rubric, but it does say the description includes activities designed to intentionally improve outreach and increase targeted academic supports, such as tutoring, mentoring by professionals, and work-based learning. So as you're going through, I think that's the end of the scoring. Right here, there's this final page that's not scored, but it's yes or no. So that's the pieces of the rubric and the RFA that align to what we're going to talk about today. So I know that was really quick. You have the slides. I don't want to sit through and read them all out loud. I dropped the slides in the chat again for those of you who have joined. And so as we go through, here's another piece of just information to remember. For Perkins 5, we have these are the categories of special populations. So since the RFA even mentions Perkins 5, and many of you are probably applying for Perkins funds, these are some other pieces to think about, how these align with our dashboard data. And so some of the language might be a little bit different, right? Instead of individuals from economically disadvantaged families, we might, we might use a little bit different language around it, but it's the same population. So looking through here, this is another kind of list of special populations we want to have in mind. Now, some of you might have used the dashboard a lot, but let's start with just a really brief overview so you understand kind of the breadth of the dashboard, and then we'll get into the depth of the California College and Career Indicator, or CCI. So the dashboard is this online tool, and it used to be that we had one big number, and when I was in the classroom, we wore these t-shirts, 900 it's on, because we really wanted to get 900. Well, what did 900 mean? I couldn't tell you, and I wore the shirt. The nice thing about the dashboard is it really divides a lot of our different kind of components of education into separate categories, so you can see how our schools are doing in any given place. And so when we get into that, it's not just about right now what our status is, but it also recognizes your ability to improve over time. And so if you, like in the old school kind of scenario, if you were at low, like really low, and you were improving year after year, you still were low, right? And this, if you're improving, there's kind of a metric that gives you credit for improvements as well as your current results. And so that really helps us to have a long-term mentality around growth. And we want to see growth. We want to see our systems improve. We want to see our students grow. And so that's kind of the difference with our California school dashboard. Now, I could give you the overview, but luckily California has created a quick 90-second video. So I'm going to give you that right now.
Welcome to the California School Dashboard. Around the dashboard in 90 seconds.
The dashboard is designed to help us understand how well our schools are doing and where improvement is needed. The best place to begin is by looking up your child's school. Right away, we see a variety of useful information called measures. Together, these give us a more complete picture of what's happening at the school. Once each year, all the information on the dashboard is updated. The state then assigns a color rating for each measure. These ratings are based on two main things: how well the school did at a certain point in time, and whether performance went up or down. If we look at one of the academic indicators, we see that, overall, students fell 62.9 points below the standards for math, although they increased 14.3 points from last year. We can also see how students performed compared to the state average. And we can view a breakdown to see how well our schools served particular groups of students. Besides schools, we can view similar data about the district as a whole. The district section includes additional information about parent involvement and school climate and conditions. The dashboard puts clear information into our hands as parents, so we can talk with teachers and school leaders and help drive our schools to success. Are you ready to take it for a spin?
You can find more information about the California School Dashboard at www.caschool-dashboard.org. This video was produced for the California Department of Education by Californians dedicated to Education Foundation.
All right, so you can see that's even a parent-facing video. So what we see is the parents actually do look at the dashboard. They get in there and can analyze the data themselves. These are all public data, and so it's important for us to be able to navigate it ourselves and then use it to communicate with families as well as change our own systems. So what we see is college and career is just one of 6 indicators that you're going to see on the dashboard that have a color. There are also 5 local indicators that are either met or not met, and those are just self-reported by each district. When we get into these 6 indicators, right, the CCI is one. And then if you want to read more about the other indicators, we're not going to spend a lot of time on it today. But each one of these is important as we look at how we serve all of our students. We're going to focus in on the college and career indicator, though, as that is where our favorite data is found. So the state does have some ways to communicate what's happening on the indicator, but this is something that our counseling department put together at SDCOE because it gives more of like which option are students taking along the way. So I want to give you this overview. We're going to get into each one of these individually, and so I don't want to confuse you. On the bigger dashboard, if we go back, there are 6 indicators. Inside the college and career readiness indicator, there are 8 ways to become prepared, okay? So we're going to dive into these 8 ways to become prepared and how our students are doing in those, and not worry about the other indicators. So this is all about the CCI. And one of the things that I like to say is it's kind of like if anyone's ever been to Panera, it's like the you pick 2 menu. At Panera, you could get a salad and a soup. You could get a half of a sandwich and a salad. And so you're going to need 2 different things to make a real college and career ready meal for our students. So that could be 2 SBAC, 2 AP, 2 IB. So sometimes it's all the same. When we get into Cte Pathway Completion, what we're going to see is you need to be a completer plus do well on the SBAC, or a completer plus do well and have college credit courses, or you could be a completer who has completed the A through G requirements along the way with all of their coursework. And this graphic actually that's a great question. Someone asked if you can obtain a copy. In the footnotes of this slide, there's a link to the PDF of this. So you're welcome to utilize that however you would like. And we'll dive into this much deeper in a little bit. But right now, before we get into that, I want you to look at your equity data. So you're going to go to californiaschooldashboard.org. But first, this worksheet, if you click on it, it's going to force you to make a copy. Because I want you to have it as your own worksheet. It's going to come up and look like this. And so you'll get your own copy of that if you click on the link. Oops. Well, wouldn't that be fun if the dashboard decided to be funky, right? No. I think that is anyone else having trouble getting into the dashboard? Oh, that's hilarious. I'm on it all the time. And if anyone from the dashboard team is on this call, I know I was emailing them recently. We should be able to get into some deeper data without that. But that is about what you can expect in the world is on the day that I have 200 people who want to learn about the dashboard. It's not up. All right, so let's see if I can get into some of the other data areas. And okay, it worked for somebody. Maybe we're overloading it. It says, oh, 100 people want in right now. It's too much for us. I'll refresh a few times, and that's CDE coordinator. Dashboard.org. Maybe I can go straight into a district. Nope. All right, so I'm going to show you going through the CDE page, she says. And let's see if we can go in this way. I was not able to, but we should get to some other data. But luckily I have tons of screenshots in here. We'll give it a second. Let me just start with some screenshots to share what you're gonna find when you get in there. So first of all, when you get into the main page, you wanna go to the 2019 pull down because there's not a release for the dashboard in 2020. And I'll just keep refreshing and see what happens. And thank you, Rosemary. I will maybe take you up on that if I have to. But let's see if we can also get into additional reports and data, and that might do it. So in the regular reports, you can see things like your college and career indicator. For college and career, you'll find out like, okay, here's 0 had red, 1 had orange, 4 had yellow. These are student groups. So it actually pulls out each student group so you can see how they're doing. In this particular district, they had 11 student groups, and none of them were in red. Orange was foster youth, and so this might be where they go, okay, we really need to focus in on see why our foster youth are not meeting prepared on the CCI. Yellow will have English learners, homeless, students with disabilities, and white students. So this is another place where you might say like, wow, we want to shift that up because it's lower than the average for the district. As we go through, what you can see is you can actually see the numbers for each one of them. If you click on, there's like tiny little buttons for each one, and you can click through and see exactly how prepared each student group was. So for this, their foster youth was only 18% prepared. Their English learners, homeless, students with disabilities, and white students were all yellow. But why? So what we can look and see is that they all increased except the white students maintained. But there's a real big difference, right? Here, that was 54.7% prepared. I know this is probably very small on your screen, but the English learners, homeless, were in the 20%, and students with disabilities were only 10.8% prepared. So this would be a place where I might say, wow, this population of students with disabilities could definitely use additional focus as I'm looking to support them in the CCI. So we can go through all of these. Oh, thank you, Susan. I appreciate that. It's like we've got a lot of people on this call who probably know somebody. So the nice thing, though, is we can actually see this particular field. And let's see if I go ahead and I'm going to give you a different link. This link is going to take you to the school district search. I am going to, for the additional reports, which is where we were going to spend most of our time. So it's going to be fine. Oh, I think Linda is saying that right now. I'm going to focus on Sweetwater. So sorry if you're on the call today, because Sweetwater is where I went to, where I taught when I was in the classroom. I used to teach chemistry and medical chemistry. Love kind of integrating the curriculum and getting that together. So here, once you get into this, so let me show you how I got here. I gave you a specific link in the chat. I'm going to just drop it in one more time. It says California model. When you get to that link, we'll just do this the roundabout way. You can put in whichever district you are, and this is going to help you with that worksheet that I have for you. And so when you put in that link, you get into here, you put in your LEA, your district or charter name, and that should come up. And you can get data for 2020, which is not released on the dashboard, or 2019. So if I want to go, I'm going to actually show you, and I want to be Sweetwater Union High District. And I want to look at the college and careers measures report. I wonder if I could hit the dashboard and if it will bring me there. Let's see if we can get in this way to the data. All right, good news. We can get to the most important of our data that we were going to look at today without even touching the dashboard. And this is why this session is kind of long, because the data we want to look at is hidden all over in these depths of the dashboard. So I want you to find this page about your LEA. It has all kinds of graphs and grids and these beautiful weird orange and tan documents. And so let me give you a second again. Go to the link that I put in the chat, put in your LEA name, your district name. You can pick a different year if you want. So if I pick a different year, I can show you also. You get more report options. And actually, this is, so if you want to find the report that's here, sorry, I'm a little bit out of my organizational mind. So let me start you over. So here we were. If I want to show you this exact thing for an LEA, you go to this page where you're going to put in your LEA name. You put that in, and when I say LEA, that's Lead Educational Agency. So that's like the district or the charter or whoever is overseeing all of your sites. We're going to go to the 2019 will give us a 5x5. I'm going to get the correct LEA here. I'm going to go down to the 5x5 College Career Placement Report. And so let me make this a little bit bigger so that you can see what I'm doing here. So this is the 5x5 College and Career Placement Report. You will not see this in the 2020 because we didn't have 5x5s in 2020. So this would only be in the 2019. When you submit that, it's going to give every site in your district on one grid. And then there's another click that you can get to have the equity data on there. So they make it a little bit, let me make it so you can see the full 5x5. So here's Sweetwater. So Jeff, if you're on here, hopefully you don't mind calling you out. And so here is all of the high schools in this district. So we can see, you know, who's in which color level. But if I go up to this little View Student Groups 5x5 report, this hidden click deep in the dashboard, what I'm going to see is actually the equity report of where each of my student groups are on this piece. And this is something I would even recommend that you cut and paste this. And this is a great question here about suggestions for rural schools who have less than 11 students in each special population. So that the interesting thing is all this data came from your district. So you may not find the CCI data here because if you have less than 11 students in a population, due to student privacy, they're not going to release the numbers. However, all those numbers came from you, right? You rolled it up. So you might have to crunch your own data and almost kind of create your own back-end dashboard to say, all right, how many of our students were completers? How many, you know, is that representative of our overall population? So I know, Rosemary, the dashboard isn't as useful for those with under 11. Now you can have some between about 11 and 33. If you have that many students, it won't give you a color, but it will give you a percentage on the dashboard. So that's a really helpful data because you can individually look at those pieces. And Rosemary, there may be some data in this other place. So let's see where we go. But this particular one that I have up on the screen right now, this is the kind of thing you might even screenshot and drop into your applications to say, well, here's where our students are right now. And I would identify here the student who has the student group, who has the least group, and the lowest number is foster youth. So in this district, I might say like, all right, I want to come up with some strategies where I'm going to focus on foster youth because they're right here. They're in orange in the low percentile, and they also haven't seen an increase in the last year. With English learners, homeless, and students with disabilities, this would be another group of students that I might want to pull up because I can see here's all students. So if I was able to pull these up to another level or see improvements, that's really going to empower our students. So let's see. And Sherry, it might be if you didn't select 2019, you can't get this grid. So let me just take us back. This is the link that I had put in, and let me put that in the chat again, since we are going off presentation for the moment. And you can easily find this on the dashboard. It will take you straight there. So here, when I put in that, in order for me to get that 5x5 grid, I have to change this to 2019 because there is no 2020 data that will give us the 5x5. And then that's going to give us a larger list to choose from, and you'll have to select, make sure I wasn't talking about that high school, or there's a charter here called Sweetwater Secondary. So there's a number of different Sweetwater related. So you pull down the exact LEA, and then you can pick which report. So hopefully, Shari, that helps you navigate to those reports. Now, we're not going to hang out in this report. What we really want to do is jump over. So if you're here, we want just go ahead and go, let's see, non-traditional as a row header. So you had to then click up here, which because you were in the 5x5, and you have to click to get the student groups 5x5. So I wonder if that's what you're seeing. I'm not seeing traditional as a row header. Let's see, Donna, do you want to explain what the question is? The button that says ask to unmute, so maybe that works. Turn off the unmuting ability since we're all in troubleshooting mode, because here we are in the depths of data. I wonder how our dashboard access is going right now. No, I'm still getting that error. All right, so hopefully, Donna, you are able to, so there's not middle school data as part of the college and career indicator. So Rosemary, we won't get into that. And so as we get into the other data, let's jump over to there. So if you go back to that space, and we're going to go to the college and career measures report. So if you go back to the link that I sent, you put in your LEA, let's go to the college and career measures report in 2019 or 2020, whichever one, it doesn't matter. And we'll take a second as it loads. I think we're overloading the CCI team today with our folks on this call. I feel like I'm going to have to do a redo of a smoother version for the video, or else other people will just have to crawl through it with us in this unfortunate CCI day. All right. So if you're on your dashboard and you are looking here at your worksheet, you can kind of skip down. And what we are right now is in the View Additional Reports page. So if you have your worksheet coming up, here's what we're going to look at together. So again, hopefully, if you want this worksheet, you're going to find that. Grab that copy for you. You can get the worksheet here. Whoops. Let me just copy the link. Right, worksheet. And it says /copy. That's your secret way to force everyone to make a copy, and so they can get into it. So right now we're going to look at our additional reports, and we're going to fill out this zone of your worksheet. So hopefully you've been able to find your way to the College and Career Measures report, which is not this one. I'm going to close that. But it should look like this: College and Career Measures reports and data. And it has a lot of grids and graphs and this fun orange area. So you're going to get to that by starting at that California model website, put in your LEA, and click College and Career Measures report. All right, so hopefully I'm going to go ahead and kind of keep going. So the first question on your worksheet is, what is the total number of students in this cohort? So a cohort for the CCI is a 4-year group of students. So in this district, they had about almost 7,000 students who graduated in 2019. All right, it's a fairly large district. So if you're doing your worksheet and if you're Sweetwater, you'd put 6,940, but all of you should be hopefully looking at your own data, and you can fill that out of what your total cohort. So that's the total number of students who graduated. Of those students, we know that 46% of them are considered prepared. You can also see that down below. In this graph, it gives you the number of students prepared, so you don't have to do the math yourself. You could pull out a calculator and see what 46% of this, but here is 3,190 students who are prepared. And Anne, what do you mean? Why no non-traditional info? it's not a group heading. Are you talking about all of these students? Because this is all the headings that we have for the CCI. All right, so as we go through, it's not like we haven't identified just non-traditional here, as it's one of the indicators, the non-traditional. So this is what we have the data for, but that's a great question that we can look into later on. Thank you. All right, so we have what subpopulations are underrepresented in the prepared category. So here's a great opportunity to say, like, all right, if I am looking at my students and I want to think about my student population, and in this particular district, if you look at their equity data, they have a really high percent of Hispanic students. Actually, right here, the fact that I think they're only about 20% white and 50% of their percent prepared are white. So that tells me that we have some gaps, that it's not representative of their student population, right? And so that's something that we want to be thoughtful of. How do we make sure it's representative? So if 10% of your students have disabilities, then, you know, maybe it's not terrible, but this is one way for us to see what we have here. And Susan's letting us know dashboard's online. We're going to stay here for a minute and then we'll go back to the dashboard because I don't want to jam you around too much. So let's go ahead and look and see how our students met prepared in this case. So here is our Cte Pathway Completion. So we can say that 663 prepared students completed a Cte Pathway. And so as we look here, we can see that a lot of these students might have also been A through G completers, right? It's a you pick two. So they probably did well in the SBAC. We don't know what combinations they have here, but you can kind of see what that looks like. Now, if as a district, you think that this number is different than it should be, that's a data issue, right? So you could go back and say, wow, we are a smaller district. We have like 3 career pathways, but only 7 kids are pathway completers. What's going on here? Now, this isn't all your pathway completers because there's some more over in the approaching prepared, and we'll roll on down to that in a moment. And so here we have all of our student groups. We can see there are no foster students who've met this. Well, let's think back to that 5x5 grid for this district. Foster students were one of the lower students on the dashboard itself. So this is a great place where you can identify, wow, one of my student groups I really want to focus on is foster students. And perhaps as a district, we can kind of come up with a college and career planning document where I could sit down and I could work with, because it's a smaller population, all of my foster students and make sure that they're on track to be prepared, and possibly that would be through Cte Pathway Completion. So in that case, we might say, wow, foster students move schools a lot. How are we empowering our counselors in order to draw in those students, or when they're registering those students, how do we say, we want to make sure our students who might be more, transferring school to school still have opportunities to do these, because that's one of the things with our special populations is if they're transferring schools a lot for whatever reason, they may not have 300 hours to proceed through. And so how are we also saying as a district, wow, this district has tons of sites. If I have a foster student coming in who did take maybe ICT at a different district, how do I help them find the right site where they can continue that pathway in my district? So that's one of the areas that we see, and you can kind of fill that out in your worksheet if you're following along. The other area that really is connected to our K-12 SWP work can be the college credit course. In college credit course, we rarely see a district that's over 10% of their prepared students needing it via college credit. In CTE, articulated classes do not count as a college credit course. Students actually have to claim and transcript the credit at the college and then bring that transcript back to the high school. Now, theoretically, the state has said you shouldn't be double dipping. If you have a concentrator and a capstone, and that capstone is articulated and they get college credit for it, it shouldn't count as a CTE completer and a college credit course, because that means that the students only did this one thing and now they're called college or career ready. I believe there may be a loophole in the data around that if you get it transcripted and transferred back. But this is where having a third course can be really helpful. So if you build it, concentrator, capstone, dual enrollment, that is a magical sequence that gets you pathway completers and college credit course. And those are the kinds of programs that are really nice for something like K-12 SWP, because now you're building all the way along. And then as you're building, you really identify student populations that you want to focus on, that you want to recruit, and that you want to support individually, so that you provide maybe more counseling services or tutoring to certain groups so that they can meet those benchmarks and get through your concentrator, capstone, and then dual enrollment. So I kind of like to think of it as like a false capstone, not dual enrollment, because in our CalPads roll up, we say, wow, that middle class is the capstone, because we want to say they're completers. But we don't tell students, well, you're done and it's optional. We just say, oh, here's your third year class, which happens to be dual enrollment, and we get that college credit. So that's another strategy that we can do. All right, and I have a question. Let me see. Data and non-traditional. And by non-traditional, Anne, are you talking about like alternative education? And I actually changed it. If you want to unmute, because I think you've asked about non-traditional a few times.
No, non-traditional means that we have engineering programs and we have maybe 2% girls in the class.
Okay.
In our patient care, we have maybe 2% boys. So we have to make a difference in hitting ICT and engineering and patient care. And every state document I go into, I can't find non-trad numbers except for in CalPads. That's it.
We're not seeing like the gender specific numbers in the CCI data. The nice thing is, right, you shouldn't be looking to one source for your data. You have all of that data in your district. You walked into that class and you saw it. So you can use district data. There's no ruling in any of this that says you have to use CCI for your data set. So I think maybe that's the best place, is to look at your own numbers and then also align that with your workforce. So now I understand what you're asking. I was like, are you talking about alt ed? Which actually, if you're an alt ed, there is some variations on the dashboard. They call it DAS schools, DASS. And there's a little bit of a difference in that your cohort is only the senior year cohort. It's not the 9th through 12th cohort, but that shouldn't strongly impact the look of your dashboard itself. Just kind of the way that you look at your data when it comes out and how many students are in that cohort. So, all right. So Valerie asks if students can earn college credit, it counts as dual credit even if it's articulated. So if you transcript articulated credits, then it can be counted as a college credit. They specifically studied articulated courses for the CCI, and the team made a recommendation to the Board of Education that articulated classes are not called out as college credit, and that was the ruling. And so articulated classes do not live here. And one of the problems is like how small of a percent of students actually claim that articulated credit. So we have thousands of students taking articulated classes, and like very few of them go actually claim the credit. And so in that case, if you go to the college, the students, they have to actually get that credit, claim the credit onto a transcript, and then transfer that transcript back to the college. Now it's considered a college credit. So there may be a loophole where if that's your capstone, then it kind of counts as both, but I would not plan around that, because I know that's explicitly been said by the CDE that that's not what they intended, is for students to be a completer and get college credit for one specific class. So that might be happening in some cases, but if you have other articulated classes, they're taking more than once, you're a completer here, you're getting the college credit in the other class, you should be able to claim that as college credit if it's transcripted, because then they actually have a college course on their transcript. Otherwise, college credit does include both dual enrollment and articulation. Oh, sorry, not articulation. Dual enrollment and concurrent enrollment. Concurrent enrollment being, I'm a student, I'm just going to go take a college class. Most of them don't transfer them back, but that is one of the things that we encourage people to do, is create reasons why they would transfer them back. All right. So the next set of really interesting data is if I keep scrolling, because this wonderful data set, which some of you are like, oh my gosh, I have 2020 data, how exciting, because I was with the LEA a couple weeks ago, and that was a fun discovery that the 2020 data is in some of these. So if I scroll down here, what I can see is this district had another 272 who did not do the You Pick Two Panera menu. They only picked one, and the only thing they finished was Cte Pathway Completion. So in this case, there were 272 students that if they had gotten them A through G approved, not approved, A through G completed, if they had done well in the SBAC, that those students would now be considered prepared on the dashboard. So we also had 383 kids who completed A through G but didn't do anything else. So where do we connect the dots and help to align programs to make sure that our CTE completers are also doing well on our tests, that they're also getting A through G credit for everything? Maybe they get a college credit course, right? Those are all the things in our You Pick Two menu for CTE. We really want to be thoughtful about how we work on that. Here, I can also see there was only one foster student here. I remember there were 0 foster students above. So in this whole district of 6,000 students graduating, only one foster student was a pathway completer. And if that was one of their lower numbers on the original CCI page, then what's going to happen is if you really focus on maybe that population and how you can encourage and support them in pathway completion, you're going to see a large increase in that specific population. They also had a low amount of students with disabilities, but look at this. They had 57 students with disabilities complete a pathway. If those 57 students also completed A through G courses, they would be considered prepared. Having never maybe even done well in a high stakes test, because we know our students with disabilities, sometimes high stakes testing is a really difficult thing. So if we can build programs of study where they hit both the pathway completion and the A through G completion, that's another way to support our students with disabilities so that it doesn't all come down to that smarter balance assessment on one day of their junior year. All right, so this is that data deep dive. You can also see here when we look at our not prepared students, we see that a lot were Hispanic, and then this district goes right up against the southern border of California. So the Hispanic population is most of the students in this district. But we still saw over 2,000 students who didn't meet prepared. And so that could be a population to focus on. Students with disabilities is a population to focus on. So these are all data sets where you can start pulling out which populations are great places to focus a little bit of extra work on. All right, let's see how our dashboard access is. Dun, dun, dun. All right, we're gonna rewind for a moment. Let's head over to the dashboard and I'll show you how to find some of these reports a little bit more easily, although it's still similarly difficult. So I'm gonna put this in the chat, californiaschooldashboard.org. This is where is the easy start. You're gonna put that in. We're gonna go to 2019 because the 2020 has really limited data. And I'm gonna, so when you're looking at all of these, there's different numbers. A district or like a LEA, so like whoever's in charge of all of your schools is gonna end with a whole bunch of zeros. So when I look at Sweetwater, well, they have a high school called Sweetwater High. This is a different charter school. But if you're looking for your district level data, it's gonna be the one that has a bunch of trailing zeros. So we're gonna click on this. And now we get our nice dashboard. This is what your parents of your district are looking at. And they look at this and they go, oh, look at your green and column career. Woohoo, yay, Sweetwater, right? And they might have some questions about some of these other ones, but like we said, we're not focused here. All right, as we scroll down, all right, and I do have a question that I must have missed, sorry about that, about a student taking English at Sierra College. The class gets posted on the student's transcript. So if you take, this is a great question, so if you're taking a concurrent enrollment class as a student and it gets put on the college transcript, that is not a data source for CCI. So that student actually has to request their transcript from the college. go on down to your high school registrar and turn in the transcript, and then that registrar can put it into the system as a college class. So there's that extra step. We don't have access to student records at the colleges automatically, but that is a beautiful place to build into your K-12 SWP those partnerships, the training, the time, and you all have a K-12 pathway coordinator, and they are there to support your connections to the college and to streamline some of these. So if you're having trouble with some of this, transcripting, work with your pathway coordinator, and that could be one of their projects that they work on, depending on what they have in their work plan. All right, so here I'm going to click on college and career. It's going to come down to this, which you saw on my slides. We kind of call this the baseball card because it's kind of like got all the overall stats. If I can click on view more details, it's just give it a second because it will rearrange to the next page where you need to be. So here's that 47% prepared. If you're doing the worksheet, you could start up at the top again. And we saw this increase 2.8%, so that's good. And that's the total number of students in the 2019 cohort. Here, again, we see we have all of our student groups, but you might say, like, what do? I have no performance color for these two student groups. And that's where if you scroll down here, you can see the specifics. So here we have foster youth in orange, and this is a really large district, and so you see most of them do have data. If I go to no performance color, both of these 13, 15 students, I don't get a color, but I can see my Pacific Islanders, they're doing all right. 46.7% prepared. That seems pretty on par with some of our other students, increased 5%. Over here, American Indian, 15.4% prepared. So even though I have only 13 students and I didn't get a color, this would be a place where I would say, wow, we have a really small amount of students. So if I work really specifically to identify my American Indian students and work with them and their families on what kinds of prepared metrics are best for them, if CTE is right for that student, let's make sure they're enrolled. Let's make sure that we specifically ensure that their schedule doesn't change, that when we move them, they're locked in that master schedule. And so that way we can prioritize certain student groups. So in this case, if you click on no performance color, you do get to see the kind of the actual data about these students. But like someone mentioned, if it's under 11 students, that is not going to appear on the dashboard, because now we're saying like, oh, it's a privacy issue, right? Well, I know a kid who's, an American Indian who's in this district. Wow, they must be really low because their data is so low. And we would never want to say that. That's terrible. So as a state, we've said 11 or under, we're not going to report. And then between that and like 33, you will get the data, but you won't get, because it's not statistically significant enough, because the N value is so low, you won't get a color. And so we can also see kind of our 3 classes in a row, and we're seeing, pretty steady movement, but we do have more prepared in 2019. So we are seeing growth in this particular district there along the way. So that is our dashboard dive. Now, if you're here in the dashboard, this is how you get to those reports that I was showing you earlier. At the very top, there's a button that says View Additional Reports. If you click that, it takes you straight to that list of reports that we had to find our alternative way to. And so that, let me show you again. You're on any of the dashboard pages, up at the very top, View Additional Reports, and that's going to take you straight to where you can find the 5x5 grid, the College and Career Placement Report, or the College and Career Measures Report. Okay, so that's your easy peasy way to get back to that data. And I have outlined all of this in the slides so that you can kind of walk yourself back through, refer to it along the way. All right, and so now I have already talked about all of this and that. We are going to, then this just kind of outlines what I talked about, so you have something to refer to. You can go through, here's Cte Pathway Completion and College Credit Course, which I find to be the 2 places that we can most move the needle through CTE funding, particularly with SWP, because it's about that alignment to our college partners. And that prepared, I think, is a really helpful measure to come back to and say, okay, how many of our kids are completing a pathway but not doing anything else? Or how many kids are A through G completers? And if we just got them into pathways, they'd be considered prepared. Great. And thank you, Margie has dropped this slide deck back into the chat so that you can refer to that. All right, and I'm actually going to escape and then present again so you'll get a better view of my slides without the bar at the top. Because we're going to jump into each one of these metrics with some strategies that go with it. And what you'll find is in your worksheet, there's an area called CTE strategies by element. This is my personal brainstorm. This is not like an end all be all of what things you could do. And wherever I had resources or knew of a resource right off the top of my head, I dropped some into the notes section. But this is where you can kind of go through and think about how your school might tackle some of these. So this came from the state, and this gives you all the prepared and approaching prepared metrics. But again, this is a really simple way to really think about the prepared piece. All right. Great question. Jamie, do students need to earn a certain number of college credits or units? I think it's 3 units. What does it say? Academic course, it's a 1 semester or 2 quarters, C- or better, but it's only academic or CTE. So you can't just go take, I don't know what fun classes kids are taking these days at college, but there are some limitations on, you know, which class is academic or CTE that can be counted on here. So but that's a great question. I feel like it's a 3-unit course, but I don't know if anyone on the call has clarification on that right now. Feel free to drop that in. But that's a good, these are my follow-up questions that I need to verify. So we're going to jump in and we're actually going to go through this document in depth, one piece at a time. Oh, 1 unit counts, says Rose. There you go, 1 unit counts. I don't know, maybe it's because most of our courses would be more than a unit. And a lot of times the courses we have kids take for a year of dual enrollment are only 1 semester worth of college. All right, no minimum number of units. I just feel like hopefully we're giving students a nice 3-unit course whenever we can, but if there's no minimum, then go for it. All right, so let's start by looking at SBAC, and we're going to kind of go through all of this and look at CTE-related strategies. So we want our students to do well on both the ELA and math. So if you were looking at something you could embed in a branch or think about the goals that you are providing for students, things like embedding literacy and mathematical practices into your CTE programs and building capacity for your CTE student instructors in this are really important. So for instance, when I did a kind of a new CTE network, I brought in our ELA folks from the county office here in San Diego, and they talked to all of our teachers around what literacy strategies we could embed in CTE. A lot of times, CTE leaders, we are technical people. Like, look at this webinar. Our job is to write grants and look at data and do all these things. We're not always instructional leaders. We don't always have, you know, background in teaching. And so how do we make sure that we bring in that expertise? Or maybe we were a CTE teacher and we never had that pedagogy of, you know, having an entire credentialing program that brought you into all of this. So intentionally providing literacy strategies for your CTE teachers, having them connect with your ELA teachers there on your site, using the same strategies and routines so that our students see grade level rigor in the writing that they're expected to do, in the reading they're expected to do in their CTE classes. That's one thing that you could consider incorporating into some of your planning. How do you support your CTE teachers in that literacy and mathematical practices? The other piece is what a lot of us are already doing, right? Academy and linked learning models give students connections from their CTE content to our local students, our English, our math, our science classes. Like I said, I taught medical chemistry, and so we weren't quite an academy or linked learning. We just created kind of an integrated pathway that pulled our science teachers in alongside our CTE teachers at the high school where I taught. And so that enabled our pathway students to really see the importance of literacy and mathematical practices to their career. And so that sometimes shifts their priorities along the way. All right, so the second one, advanced placement or IB, that's kind of number 2 and number 3. So AP exams, scoring a 3 or higher on 2 AP exams, or a 4 or more on 2 IB exams. And then also if that student is a A through G completer, then they just have to do one of them. So that's that you pick 2. But if we're thinking about where this connects to CTE, the one place that we do see AP connected to CTE is in computer science. So if you do have a computer science pathway or an ICT pathway, you may be able to embed computer science into that. If you already have computer science happening at your sites, maybe you could turn that into a CTE pathway. And so right now, that's kind of where the alignment is. There was some new CTIG legislation that we won't get into in this meeting because there's no clarity on it yet, that passed in July, which may open the door to more connections between AP and CTE. And so we'll have to see what that looks like in the next round of CTEIG funding. So as I will probably revise this, it seems like a lot of people like to talk about this for each round of grants that we have going on in the future. College credit, like we talked about, this is a grade of C- or better for 2 semesters or 3 quarters. And I will verify that 1 credit piece. I think that would be fantastic. But when you're doing the college credit, if you're looking at that as a CTE related goal, you could focus on dual enrollment opportunities aligned to your CTE courses. Like I say here, articulation is not currently part of the indicator. You can also incentivize concurrent enrollment or articulated students to claim their credit and transfer it back. The district that we see the highest number of college credit students is San Diego Unified. And I feel like there's a couple of things that they've done to really empower their students to claim college credit. One, they worked with the college to better streamline the process. First, at the beginning of the semester, when they send out the syllabus for parents to sign, they also send out all the articulation forms so that the parents sign everything at the beginning of the year. It all goes into a file. And when it comes time to give out the articulated credits, they already have that paperwork on file, and it's not another round of paperwork that they have to do with parents. Then they have streamlined some processes with the colleges around claiming those credits. And finally, San Diego Unified has a board policy that college courses are a 5-point-A, similar to AP exams. And so that has really incentivized students because we know some of our students who are, a 4.0 plus, they're reluctant to even transfer these because it can actually drop down their GPA for a 4-point-A. And so by giving a 5-point-A, that improves their ability to do college credit work. So, all right, so we want to see that. And then again, here's that CalPEDS. They used to call it dual enrollment at the beginning, but now they're calling it college credit course. They made that change a few years ago, but if you haven't been in the CCI as deeply as I have, you might not have seen that. Great. And somebody did say a warning. Yes, the 5.0 may not count towards your valedictorian class status. It could be, and I think that's all based on the district and its district policies. So if you are looking to pass a board policy around a 5.0A, then that you have to look and see how it affects other policies there in your district. And that's for claimed college classes that are transcripted, Shari. So it's not a 5-point-A for an articulated class until it gets transcripted and transferred back. And so that does incentivize the students to actually do that work, to do the applications, and to turn in all the paperwork, because then it can affect their grade point. And of course, college entry, they have different 5 points that are going to be counting, but it does help incentivize it along the way. Tanya, I think questions about college application registration paperwork are great for your K-12 pathway coordinators, because every college, even though they have kind of a core application, the rest can be really different. And so that's something to work there. And when I say it's transcripted, that means if I have if I'm a student and I completed an articulated class, that credit is not on my transcript as on my college transcript, right? You might be using CATMA, you might just need to fill out paperwork. There's a variety of ways that students can transcript that credit. So it'll be transcripted as a high school class, right? Maybe you took automotive capstone, it was articulated with the college. So that student actually has to fill out paperwork with the college to claim that credit. And then that credit is claimed on their college transcript. Then they have to request this college transcript and bring it back. Now, every district's really different in how this goes. One of my colleagues was literally the counseling lead for the County Office of Ed, and her daughter had an articulated class, and it took her a lot of work to figure out how she could go and get the credit and have it put on her transcript. So in some cases, it's just a process that not enough people are doing, and so it's not streamlined. And I can't speak to what each district does, but that is a great place. I don't know about sign language and how it counts on the CCI. So that's a good question, Linda. I'll download the chat after this, and maybe there's some FAQs to add to this in the future. When we go through after college credit, the next one is the State Seal of Biliteracy. So this doesn't seem like it has a big connection. It's not part of the UPIC 2 associated with CTE. However, one of our biggest populations is language learners. And so whether it's supporting the State Seal of Biliteracy or just supports our language learners in acquiring English, if we can ensure that we're building capacity in CTE teachers to support language learners, that is really powerful. It's going to improve their work in our classes as well as in our other classes. A lot of times we see language learners like in a deficit model, like they need to learn English. I think in CTE, we can also really celebrate their contributions and how having more than one language empowers them in industry and gives them more opportunity and things like that. And so, having a real asset-based mindset when it comes to dual language students in our CTE classes is important. So the thing is, though, this teacher they came out of industry, now they're teaching students. They may not actually have that pedagogical background of understanding how to support a language learner. How do you incorporate more vocabulary up front? How do you translate the jargon within our industries that isn't necessarily in a student's kind of dialect when they're learning a language? How do you also, we see great programs in healthcare. I know one of our districts here has started a Spanish for health careers as the class that the kids in their health academy are going to Spanish for health careers. And so that really it's acknowledging and celebrating the need to have that diversity in our workforce. And so, this is a place where you can think of strategies to really build capacity, maybe send your CTE teachers to additional training, or bring in someone from your district or region or your county office of ed who can support your CTE teachers in better building their ability to support our language learners. All right, let me come back. I know there's more questions over here around articulation. I see counts as a LOTE. Is that a language of, I don't know what LOTE. Yes, and a lot of times I know sign language can count for extra when it comes to the your language other than English. Thank you. I was like, I know that somewhere in the back of my head, but we're in alphabet soup here. So, and then let's see. Linda says articulations often only occur in the capstone. Grades aren't given until the end of the year. Yeah, it's hard to capture those credits in time to roll it up because, so really, if you have kids in your junior year getting those credits, that's easier, but that's also why dual enrollment is better for your seniors because they're not having to go through that rigmarole, right? Dual enrollment is that they're in a college class. So it's not as much difficulty to transcript it as it is with articulation because the credit is already part of the program instead of something you claim afterwards. if that kind of makes sense. And that's where if you have sophomores in a concentrator, juniors in a capstone, and seniors in a dual enrollment, I feel like that is the current best practice when it comes to building out a really college-aligned pathway. And so that would be a great kind of strategy for working with your K-12 SWP. All right, so those are those questions. Thank you. All right. If you were curious about the state seal of biliteracy, we have a whole nother team at our county office who really works meaningfully on that. That's something that is a district by district choice, whether they're going to award it. But there's more information here if you want to understand more. And there's a lot of links in the notes on that page. There's not a real particularly CTE related strategies with leadership and military science. A lot of times it's run out of the same office. So many of you might be working in with your JROTC or working on those programs at the same time as working on CTE, but it is a alternative way to get to being considered prepared on the indicator is if you are completing 2 years of JROTC and score a 3 or higher in ELA or math and a level 2 in the other. And so that's not necessarily a CTE, a great strategy, but since we're in the CCI, I definitely don't want to skip one. And this might be something that not everyone knows. But again, JROTC is something that is either offered or it isn't. So if you're offering JROTC, make sure your data is clean. And you can see how many folks are completing that in that dashboard deep dive. Here are some of the requirements that come from the CDE website. Now, we need a whole page of strategies for this. So Cte Pathway Completion, we know that in order to do that, you need 300 hours and concentrator capstone. You need that C- or better, plus either doing well on one of the SBACs, the college credit, or the A through G. Allowable. And someone's asking if there's a revised list. So this is the current list. There's one more metric, and we'll talk about it at the end, that they're considering, but they have not yet incorporated work-based learning. But interestingly enough, there's space for it in that deep dive part of the dashboard. So next year when we report it, we'll at least see where that data lands. But let's talk about some of these strategies here for Cte Pathway Completion. So I put this also in your worksheet, things like course sequencing. You want to clarify your course sequencing. Do you have concentrator capstone? Are they coded properly? Are they in the right, in the same pathway, right? We used to be able to kind of like zigzag around pathways, but now you need to be two in the same pathway within the same sector, right? So make sure your sequencing is there. Make sure it's clear. Make sure that when you're communicating your sequencing through marketing and recruitment, that you're not talking about as an elective. I think some of the things that we've done is work with some students who quit pathways. We did a day where we went and interviewed a bunch of students who stopped pathways after 1 day, or sorry, after 1 year. And their response was, we didn't actually know that it was a pathway. I just thought it was a 1 year elective, and then it was over, and I was like, oh, I'm good. So they just didn't have that mentality. Now, it's not like we're locking them in. We know that students can transfer out, but by really promoting it as this community, and you're going to have multiple years, and here's what you're going to get at the end, that can really help to be clear on your course sequencing along the way. And then reporting errors, that is a big one, right? I worked with a district a couple weeks ago. We went into their CCI for 2019. 0 kids had the seal of biliteracy. We went to 2020 and they had 37. And so it was just a reporting error in that first year. And so the second year, they really got a boost in their CCI. We see reporting errors a lot of times in college credit. So if you look at college credit, sometimes if you transfer it back and you just replace the high school grade, it's not a college credit. So you have to make sure that it's tagged in your SIS as a college credit, and each SIS has a little bit of a different way to do that. And honest truth, I don't report that in a SIS for my work, and so it would be something you could work with your data folks with. Recruitment into your program. Now, recruitment is huge, and I have in the worksheet a link because I have a whole presentation on recruitment and marketing, and so that's huge because when you do recruitment pieces, one of the things you can do, particularly from an equity mindset, consider what you're doing with your middle school. can you send some of your students, preferably like in those areas where you want more girls to be in your engineering class, send some girls down to the middle school to work with your with the science kids down there, and maybe more girls will see, oh, I want to be in that program. Work with your middle school on bringing in work-based learning opportunities that have diverse members of industry represented, so that your student population say, wow, I want to do that when I grow up, and I'm not going to be alone when I get there. And so some of the strategies that we can use for recruitment and marketing, outside of just being really clear and making sure that all stakeholders in your site and at the middle schools understand your programs, is also about representation, and how do we make sure that we model representation so that students who are in that student group, it's not that we're like intentionally saying, no, only boys are allowed in engineering. For goodness sakes, of course we want all genders to be equally represented, right? And we want, whether it's girls, boys, LGBTQ, we want all of our student groups to really feel welcome in our pathways. And so by bringing those members of our community or of our high school community or our industry into kind of the feeder groups, it may help those students feel like they have a better connection with that. Retention from year to year, that's like I said earlier, how do we have this mindset with our students that we are going to continue every year in this pathway, that we're a community? We don't want to see, what do we see all the time? We have like 2 or 3 sections of the year 1 class, and then that year 2 class, okay, we want to get completers, but there's only 17 kids. Do we keep it open? Do we need to close that section? What do we do, right? So we want to make sure that we're really intentionally looking at retention. That also comes down to master schedule prioritization, and making sure, we'll have a class that says, hey, in the spring, 35 kids want that capstone. In the fall, why are there only 17? Well, because we didn't lock them in. And then when they change this schedule, they start shuffling all the kids, and now they're not available during period 3, which is the only period that they're available, right? So there are some technical things that we can do to lock students in, but we all know master schedules only get a couple of things to prioritize, right? And so how do we say, hey, we really want to prioritize these student groups to be locked into certain classes in order to ensure that they have access all the way through? This one's a hard one. Pathway quality and consistency. We all love CTE, and we are all champions for CTE. But if you've ever walked into a CTE class and the kids, like, their heads are down, or they're watching a movie, or, how do we support our CTE instructors to be awesome teachers? We can write grants all day long, but if we don't support them in their growth, and we don't model what it looks like to be a high quality teacher, then we're just not going to get kids into that program. And so this could look like having them meet with other teachers who teach the same thing. And actually, on my last slide, I do these sector collaboration meetings that teachers from across the state go to. And so we have some scheduled in September. Your teachers are welcome to come. And they just talk to each other. Like, we had welding teachers from like 5 different districts across the state. And I swear they were in there like an extra hour after we the time closed for this collaboration, because they haven't talked to anyone else who teaches the same thing as them. They get pumped up, they find new strategies, they get excited. So I find that collaboration is a really nice way to help teachers have that quality and consistency, because none of us can have expertise in 15 sectors as CTE leaders. It's just not reasonable. So we have to give them ways to see what quality looks like in another one. All right, thank you. I'm glad that you are enjoying. I'm going to do the collaborations once in the fall and once in the spring this year, and I'd love to continue them forever, or until people stop coming to Zoom meetings. So thank you, Lily. I'm glad that you enjoyed those. A through G status, all of your CTE classes, at least your capstones, but also your concentrators could get CTE, could get A through G approved. You do that through the UC Regents. You submit just like any other class. Most of them are going to be elective credit, but there are many CTE classes that can get other credits. For instance, arts credits with your AME classes. You can sometimes get science credits for certain engineering classes. Computer science kind of floats back and forth between math and science. Some of the complicating factors are credentials, right? In order for the state to accept a D-level lab science, they probably need the science credential, but for us to pay for it with CTE, they also need a CTE credential. So where do we find that unicorn? I don't know, but if you have one, send them my way, because we're trying to hire an engineering teacher right now who could teach other things too. But as we look at how we have A through G, at least they should be elective classes. As you're looking at your bigger picture. And like I talked about, master schedule prioritization, identify conflicts and competition. AVID is a great program, but it's really hard to fit 300 hours of CTE in a schedule that also has AVID that only has 6 period days. And so how do we work with our partners in AVID and in CTE to say, okay, what would it look like for a student who's in both programs to do both of those and the A through G, right? So there are some tough decisions sometimes that are made along the way, but we want to support our students. It's not like they're locked into CTE, but we want to make sure that if they want to be a completer, that we have a path to completion for them. And I think one of the big things for path to completion is the program of study. And so when we look at A through G requirements, we need them to have that plus one of these others, which is Cte Completers. So our Cte Completers, one of the great things, and I have a template in the recruitment and marketing slide deck. There are a lot of things that cover programs of study, but also actually one of our district partners did a presentation at one of our local community college counselor sessions on developing high quality program of study. So I've included the slides and recording there. So you can really think about how do we set our students up to complete A through G and complete CTE? What does their freshman, sophomore, junior, senior look like so that it's really easy for our counselors to counsel students into those classes and for our students to know what sequence of courses they should take each year to be a completer. All right. This really fun new metric is around work-based learning. Work-based learning is up for consideration on the CCI. There's a lot of information on the CPE website. This is like a list of different things that are eligible. Some are only in the special ed workability programs. So they look like, we're like, but we do work-based learning, but some are in their work-based learning category, which could overlap with your work. The areas that I see ripe for opportunity when it comes to grants are things along these lines. So student-led enterprise, how are you supporting students in their ability to have a business as part of their CTE program? And so that revenue generating businesses is what this says. It doesn't have to make a profit. It just has to revenue generate. Simulated work-based learning, I think we're still looking for some clarification on what all these mean from the CDE. And so we're excited because I think this could be an interesting place to work with an industry partner. For instance, I work a lot with Illumina, which is a local biotech company. And so could we create something that all of our biotech classes do that kind of simulates the workplace? And I feel like this is where we could see scale, is the simulated idea, almost like a little fake internship, I guess. So we'll see what happens with that. The internship is right here under work-based learning. So we all are familiar with internships, and then pre-apprenticeship and youth apprenticeship. Now, one thing that I think is important to remember, our students already get credit for CTE on the dashboard. And so the work-based learning that we have already done in CTE forever, that's not what this is about. That's not about like guest speakers and company tours. This is about saying, how do we help our students take another step out into the workplace and really experience it, right? So a lot of these are kind of beyond this. The website that's on here is really helpful. I have actually a meeting with the folks at the state next week, so I'm hoping to continue to kind of like nudge along the understanding that we need more clarification. And we want to see how we could model what this looks like on all of these. And so course code so it's not a course. And if you go to the CDE website, that's going to have everything because it's this number 20 in the CalPads is where simulated work-based learning goes, but it's not a separate course, right? It's going to be maybe connected to the course it is. And so I do have someone, and this is actually a really interesting question that someone direct messaged me around clubs generating revenue, because one of my questions for the CDE, because even though it's not CTE, I was like, well, is ASB considered a revenue generating piece? And students who are in ASB might be eligible for this part of the CCI when it comes to student-led enterprise. And so I would foresee that clubs, I think when you look at it, it has to be associated with a course. So our clubs, our CTSOs who are associated with a course and are also kind of running a business, I believe will fall under that category. And so we'll have to see a little bit more clarification from them. I know everybody's already probably reported on this year's. I don't think anyone's too stressed about this year's. It was just to get something in. But now that we're back in school and we see a lot more of these happening, I'm hopeful that this coming year we can have a lot cleaner data. All right, so yeah, it can be any course. Great, Linda. And that is actually the interesting thing here. These are not CTE, right? We can get that random kid who took an internship and has never taken CTE. How are they going to capture that information in our SIS? Who's in charge of that? Is that going to be our counselors? Is it going to be, our registrar? How are we going to incentivize that they tell us anything about these things? So as we start to build our systems as CTE people, because we believe that we have a lot of ownership in work-based learning, we need to be partnering with our counseling. We need to be partnering with our special ed programs and making sure all of this is kind of tied together. So here we are at the end. Again, hopefully everyone has the link unless you jumped in super late. I know we've dropped it in a bunch of times, so I'm going to drop this one more time here. And so here we have upcoming opportunities. Those sector collaboration meetings, I dropped that flyer here. We're also, I don't know if anyone came to our Go Virtual Career Pathways Conference last year. We did it kind of during a school day last year. And then this year we're going to do it after school across 3 days, and we just opened our call for presenters, and registration will open this by Monday. So that's a free online conference, and we would love to see best practices in what people are doing maybe differently because of COVID this year. So that is the Dog and Pony Show of the CCI. We not only tackled it, but we had our technical difficulties. So thank you for sticking around. There's almost 100 of you still left in here. So hopefully that means it was helpful. It was definitely recorded, and I am happy to share this out. And it seems like there's an appetite for this. So maybe with each fun new grant cycle that we all have to go through, I'll try to do a repeat that focuses on that particular grant. So again, if anyone has questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thanks for following us if you're watching the recording.